on policy and regulatory landscapes for ESG in India. The panelists will discuss insights from industry, overview of current regulatory frameworks and policies promoting ESG adoption, explore innovative approaches, partnerships, and stakeholder engagement for effective ESG integration, and throw light on business responsibility and sustainability reporting (BRSR) interface with other global reporting framework. We have with us our panel chair, Dr. Ray, to also introduce our panelists, Dr. Ajay Ranka, Chairman and Managing Director, Zydex Industries, and former member, Technology Development Board, Government of India. Dr. Ranka is the Chairman and MD of Zydex Industries, Zydex Group. He's a PhD in Polymer Science and Engineering, USA, who started his career with PPG Industries, USA. He founded Zydex in 1997 as a specialty chemicals company with a philosophy of innovating for sustainability to conserve and extend the life of limiting resources. Dr. Ranka is also the managing committee member of FGI. Professor Pratyush Shankar, Provost, Navrachana University, and Dean of SEDA, Humboldt Fellow, International Ambassador for Universität Bonn, Germany. Professor Shankar is an academic and Dean of SEDA, Navrachana University. He was the acting Dean of Architecture and head of the undergraduate program at CEPT University and has been teaching urban history and design for many years now. He has authored the book titled Himalayan Cities, Settlement Pattern, Public Places and Architecture. He is presently also a guest professor at the Mundus Urbano program at Architecture Faculty, TU Darmstadt, Germany. Professor Shankar was awarded the 22nd JK Cement Architect of the Year Award 2013 in the Residence Design category. Our third panelist, CA Harsha Ramnani, FCA, DISA, ICAI, and Registered Valuer, SNFA. She is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, ICAI, Diploma in Information Systems Audit, and Commerce graduate from Kanoria Girls College, Jaipur. She is also Registered Valuer for Securities and Financial Asset class and has certification in Forensic Accounting and Fraud Detection, Concurrent Audit of Banks, IND-AS, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, and Public Finance and Government Accounting by ICAI. She has over 12 years of post-qualification, front-to-end experience and exposure as an auditing expert in various industries. I would now request Mr. Samir Khera, the conference chairperson and Vice President FGI, to felicitate the panelists with a memento. Thank you, Mr. Khera. May I now request the panel chair, Dr. Anjan Ray, to moderate the panel discussion, please. Thank you.
Good morning once again, and good morning to my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure and privilege to have you here. Let me quickly outline the purpose of this session. We've already heard in the opening session about the overview around ESG and the human context. Now we're going to get more focused onto the policy and regulatory landscape and its implications for commerce and industry. So, some key questions that we will ask. We will ask how resource extraction and waste generation are linked to industrial and commercial practices and what their implications are for health, food security, and water security. We will ask about what role industry will play and how it might affect their balance sheets and compliance records. And we will also talk about how academia will support industry and in turn, how industry will support academia, going back to that R&D investment comment that the Chief Economic Advisor made. Finally, if I make something very complicated, it's hard to comply. How can we simplify, enable, and ensure compliance to ESG standards? I'm not going to be taking time from my panelists because I don't think I need to make additional opening remarks. I will go straight to Dr. Ranka and ask him, Dr. Ranka, please provide your perspectives on achieving the transition to ESG compliant circular economy.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Good morning to you all. One thought I would want this whole set of people to carry today. See, we need to look at ourselves as visitors to the planet Earth. And I don't think all of us are here to stay permanently. So definitely this visit is for a specific period of time. Then I also want a thought to have in your mind every day, that if you think about the visitors in year 3000, and if they ever look back at the visitors of 21st century, how are they going to judge you? And in my perspective, we will go in the history as one of the most selfish visitors who have ever visited the planet Earth. And I think that is the real pinch which must generate a thought, an action, and an actual change which we are looking for. And I think that comprises the entire ESG, that we want to leave a planet which is better. Having said that, let me say, there are 3 steps in which the goal of sustainability will actually be accomplished. You can't do that overnight. We can't be Mahatma Gandhi, lifestyle adoption. No, everybody will just throw us out. So, step number 1, you need to identify all the limiting resources which you think are likely to get exhausted. Think of simple things like cement. Think of simple things like sand. Think of simple things like copper. You know, fuel. We talked about that. But this is something which needs to get extended in terms there of life cycle. See, if you take one shirt, like he said, and if I can use it for 50 times rather than 10 times, I am basically reducing my footprint. So extending the purpose of a limiting resource should be a starting point. Followed with, can it be then replaced with something which is abundant? That could be an innovation of the second layer. The industry must transform towards that. And then the third thing would be cradle to grave. That means complete recyclability. Can we achieve that? Can we evolve our lifestyle, our visit of the planet Earth, into a technique by which we never used anything from the Mother Earth? We always returned it back in the same form. And while doing all this activity, can we actually manage to protect our biodiversity? I don't think most of us are really mindful to that. Can we actually affect the environmental pollution? And at the same time, can we actually be bringing happiness in our lives? I think ESG really doesn't capture that, but at the end, as a business, we must look at, are we actually be happy or we are not? And I think that also needs to be a thought which needs to be going through our mind every day. So ESG is not about some abstract idea happening one day in a year, but it's an every moment you are going to be making it part of your life, part of your ecosystem. And I think that's my starting comment and message. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Ranka. I think it is important that you mentioned biodiversity. So for all of us here who are now senior citizens, which I guess represents some percentage of the room, 60% of the vertebrate animals, vertebrate mammals that were on the earth when we were children are not there now. 60% of the species are gone. In parts of Latin America, particularly in the Amazon basin, 90% of aquatic animals are gone. So I think that that consciousness also needs to come to us, that the planet doesn't belong to us alone. But on the other hand, we are also in a commerce and industry environment, and we know that because the world uses currency, we are also, by the way, the only species on earth that uses currency as a measure of wealth, right? Squirrels accumulate nuts, but it's a functional currency only for their own use. But we actually see currency as a sign of success. So for Ms. Harsha Ramnani, I think let us first look at how would industry engage with the community at large to enable effective end-to-end partnerships for ESG.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, first of all, to FGI and all the dignitaries who are present here. Just to start with, on a business perspective or a professional side, we heard so many times about the term greenwashing or the tick box exercise when it's come to the compliances part. On a positive side, if I want to share something here, and if I want to share my experience, which I got from last 4 to 5 years very specifically, I think before 5 years, if we talk about business, everyone, whenever we were talking about business, it was always like top line and a bottom line, right? We were only talking about the revenue part and the profit part. What is the revenue top line? What is the profit as a bottom line? But from last 3 years, a change already being seen on a board level, a change already being seen on a discussions level, and very specifically on a startup level, where investors are coming to new business people, the new business startups, and they are asking, what about the triple bottom line? And when we say the triple bottom line, that includes our economics and the social aspects both, environmental and social aspects both. So this is one change where already community, acceptance of the ESG aspect has been seen. Second, whenever we talk about ESG on a board level, on a business level, I always first insist to talk it or to pronounce it as like GES. Because when governance is already there, when the tone at the top is already there and that is set on the right path, then environmental aspect and the social aspect both can be achieved by good timeline and the good targets by the companies. I already recently reviewed certain of the companies, their sustainability reports as well as their BRSR report, and it was just for the purpose of certain project was, and it was very good amount of surprise for me that it was not only a just tick box exercise, they were actually having targets with a specific timeline, with a specific goals in terms of short term, mid term and a long term. So yes, if we talk about top 1,000, 500 companies are already aware about things, they are doing things, they are understanding what is need to be done, why ESG is important, but for rest of 500 or maybe other listed company who are not right now on a compliance part, they somewhere need certain capacity building programs, the awareness programs that why it is important. Startups also understanding the same, because second most important thing when we talk about startups, now startups are not like that they just want a domestic presence, they just want a national presence, they want an international presence. And when we talk about international presence, European standards are already matured, US standards are already matured. Any of the participants, are you aware about what is the target for India for net zero? COP26 sir presented the slide. 2070. And what is the target for the US? 2050. So the target which we are keeping, so these governments, so if business wants presence in US, if business wants presence in Europe, they need to comply with the ESG compliances, they need to follow that rules. So startups are also following the same, and just to start with my discussion, for me, if we talk or if we see the business perspective, they are understanding. Yes, greenwashing is also there. There are certain points where companies, where businesses needs to improve themselves. But some certain of the companies, the big players, they are setting right tone for the rest of business, rest of industries to comply with the ESG requirement. Thank you, sir.
Those were excellent points, Harshaji. Let me draw on that and come back to net zero for a minute, because net zero is actually a very ambitious word. Net zero is not the same as decarbonization, and it requires you to actually know your carbon footprint in scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 levels, right? Scope 1 is your own emissions. Scope 2 is emissions from the energy or from things that you're buying directly. Scope 2, sorry. And scope 3 is from all the emissions being incurred indirectly. For example, if your employee is traveling by air, that's a scope 3 emission, for example, including your value chain partners. So now, I think it is not always easy to figure out what your scope 3 is, but a simple rule of thumb is if you're in a service industry, your scope 3 will be significant, right? If you're in a manufacturing industry, probably your scope 1 and 2 will be more significant. If you're in an energy-intensive manufacturing industry, your scope 2 will be very significant, and so on. But coming back to the points that are raised, common understanding, capacity building, awareness of the triple bottom line, this is where academia comes into play. And how will industry invest in enabling academia to help industry? So for that, I hand over to Professor Pratyush.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, for a very enlightening keynote and for setting the tone. I think I'm representing the academia here, and it's a challenge. I think the first question to really ask is, and I always ask this question, what is a university? And the general answer is, well, university is a place where you teach and where we prepare the student for the industry to face the world. But actually, if you really get into the fundamental responsibility of a university, it is to create new knowledge, chemists like you doing research, and to have a long view of the problem. So our job is not simply to prepare a generation that will land up a job or to fulfill industry requirement, but our job is to see what is going to happen 20, 30 years down the line, which essentially means that academia will have to invest in research, and there is no way out. There's always this debate between pure research and fundamental research. Well, the answer is very simple. The pure research that you do now leads to applied research in 20 years, and in 25, 30 years, there will be solutions for the society. So there is no escape from research. You cannot do research by tuition fees of students. I'm talking absolutely the hard reality of Indian academia. We are running our universities through tuition fees that we are charging to students because the ecosystem is very different. Which means that we are not doing enough research. As I said, you will not always find industry funding because industry funding might only be available for applied research. You would need also immense government funding for research. So I feel that the two areas that are very important is industry funding and government funding. Now let's come to the reality of our country and where we are. I mean, in the German university system where I teach, the kind of funding that is available from the government and industry is immense, but that's not the reality that we have. Which means that we will have to look for new models where in the absence of public sector funding, in the absence of or whatever the limitations of the industry, we are able to carry out certain research. I mean, we are experimenting with this whole idea where the capstone project of thesis, which is like 6 months long or almost a year long, actually is an industry-linked project that students do. I think for too long, we have looked towards the West for models of how we should be running our academia. Or at another extreme, we have surrendered ourselves and we are calling ourselves teaching shops. And our job is to teach. I think the answer is somewhere in between. And Indian universities, especially private university, will have to find internship-based research, thesis-based research, and new forms of model. And I'll come to the global and Indian perspective in a while, but we'll have to look for new models that was not done in the West, and that we're not doing now here also. And perhaps that is where we can leverage this gap. Having said that, we have to invest in pure research or fundamental research. I absolutely believe when you're doing research, you're not solving the problem of today, but you're solving a problem that will come 20 years hence. So that's just my opening statement on the need for research.
No, I think that's a very, very important statement. Having been through college, all of us would have been through school and college and university. If we look at the Sanskrit words, Vidyalaya, where knowledge resides, Mahavidyalaya, where great knowledge resides, and Vishwavidyalaya, where global knowledge resides. There is obviously the emphasis is on knowledge. Teaching and research are only ways to acquire that knowledge. And not only teaching and research, but also social interaction, also experiential learning. These are all components of that. Now, also having been on the other side of the table in providing research grants, etc., I will say one thing. As a country, we need to progress significantly away from just STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics-based funding, to broader social impact analysis, to a broader understanding of anthropological factors, to a broader understanding of the interplay between commerce and social factors and environment. I think the time is ripe for a very strong ecosystem that encourages high-quality research in ESG areas. With that, let me hand it over to Dr. Ranka and ask him to take it forward on the socioeconomic impact aspects, particularly food and agriculture.
See, I think all of us are very, very concerned today. If we look at the future of India, the first thing which comes to my mind is the health. What is the kind of food which we are eating? Let me share with you Murli Manohar Joshi's Parliament report in 2015 documented very clearly that we have lost 48% of our nutritional value in the food we consume today. So what are we feeding our children? Number two is that our level of toxicity in our food supply chain is on the higher side, and we need to be very concerned about the future of India's generations. If we look at the food supply chain, which we are basically utilizing today, how are we producing it? And if we look at our degradation of soils, which are the key to our survival as a country, as India, there's a massive problem. Let me share with you, 36 million tons of chemical fertilizers is being put on our soils on a yearly basis. And we need to change that. If really ESG has to happen, that's one area which needs to happen rapidly, quickly. What is the need for that? Let me share with you. The amount of nitrate and ammonium ions, which we are releasing in our water source through the application of these 36 million tons on our ground, only 15 to 20% is taken up by the plant, rest is going in our groundwater. And these two ingredients are the basic feed for cancerous cells. If you really go into the mechanism, these are the key. That means you are creating a society where you are encouraging a very large supply of raw material for cancerous growth. And this is where we need to start focusing on, that we need to address this issue. Number two, look at the way agriculture is today being done. We have already achieved 55 to 60% of land which is being irrigated. And what is the result of that now? we are starting to deplete our water resources tremendously. Now, if you look at the solution to this, these are very simple. We need to transit to what we call as biofarming. There is a lot of discussion about prakrutik farming. You must have heard about it. A lot of people talk about natural farming. But 5-year dip in income and loss of yield are never going to be accepted in commerce. So what was said, internalize the cost. So unless we create a biofarming technique which is profit positive, this is not going to happen. And which is going to be chemical free, this is not going to happen. Today with biotechnology, this is possible. Like I am sharing with my personal experience, we have a complete set of technology where this transition can be done in one crop cycle and completely, and in every crop which we grow for our food chain. So it is possible. Now the question is reaching to the masses, making it happen and all that, that's a different story, but that will happen. But these two problems, according to me, are very crucial for our survival as a society, are crucial for our grandchildren to really be healthy and live happily. So water pollution is a major issue. Depleting water tables is a major issue. Just imagine, just as to sensitize ourselves, if there is a 15-year drought, continuous drought, what are we going to do? Our soils are already depleted down to 200 feet, which was earlier maybe 10 feet. Are we going to go with a begging bowl around the whole world? That's the question. So I think now the last point is there an economic opportunity for all of us? We are not sitting here just for fun. Let me give you the number. The total market to change from chemical farming to biofarming can be as large, alone in India, can be around 5 to 7 lakh crores. 5 to 7 lakh crores. I have done an estimate. And when we talk about Indian context, the golden land of India actually was called golden because of our ecosystem of temperature, our rainfall, and our biological action to produce the food chain. We can actually be the organic food producer of the world. And that's where the incomes can come up with the large workforce we have. And I think industry can actually exploit this opportunity. And that opportunity is to the extent of at least 100 lakh crores, if you really look at the whole world opportunity. So it's a massive pie available. That means almost today's 1/3 of GDP can come out of only our food supply chain system. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Ranka. Always interesting insights. I'm going to pass that to Madam Ramnani. And he highlighted certain areas. Now, because without picking on any client confidentiality, what are the big thrusts that you see in your client base, in the industry that you observe? Where are they going? What are the priority areas in which they're investing from an ESG standpoint?
Okay. So before answering Sir's question, I just also wanted to add something from COP26. Sir, because last slide was there, and Dr. Anjan sir said that it should be the internalized cost. So our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, sir, he introduced one concept in COP26 that's called as a life. Any of you are aware about the full form of life, the concept which was introduced in 2021? Yes, sir, please. Lifestyle for the environment, and we can give the title of pro-planet people to our, moderator, sir, Anjan Ray, sir, because in that particular conference, it was urged to all the, Indian citizens to follow the life concept, lifestyle for the environment, where we can save environment, we can, help social upliftment in the society. And as sir said that now he is not bought any textile for last 7 to 8 years. So the pro-planet people title we can give to sir. And last also he said that that promise was made and promises can be broken. But when we are in an industry, and very specifically when in the SEBI governance is there, in a SEBI we have one regulation that is for unfair trade practices. And when we read the definition of fraud under that unfair trade practice regulation, that definition has point number D, that promise made without intention to perform it comes under the definition of fraud. So if any industry when it's come to the BRSR or the ESG reporting aspect, if they are trying to, somewhere if they are keeping any target where the intention from a start point, it's not to perform that, it's just a greenwashing, probably it will come and under the non-compliance, although Anjan sir said it should not be the term which was used, like the term he has used, it should not be naming and shaming. But when it's come to the compliance, and if there is a non-compliance always has a cost. So that is one more point where industry is already aware about the things, that if they will not comply with the regulatory requirement, somewhere the non-compliance will, have certain cost, which can, give them more problems in the future. Now come to the point, where is the specifically industry facing the issues or the facing problems in terms of implementation of ESG, or on a second thought, we can call it as a reporting of BRSR. So first part is, first of all, the implementation part. If we talk about the thing which sir already stated, that first we need to identify where as a business, because every business has a different perspective. If we talk about manufacturing, they has a certain different challenges. If we talk about service industry, they has a certain different challenges. So first step is to identify what kind of the problems from 17 SDGs they can address. And that particular address is still where they are working right now. They are not completed their work, whether which particular part they can address, being a good corporate governance company, complying with the ESG requirement, and the genuine targets. Because when we talk about BRSR reporting, it asks for the employment composition. And when it talks about employment composition, it's not only about male and female. It also talks about the others, transgenders. So and on that part, they are not clear what there can be a targets, how they can implement the same. If any of you seen the Aditya Birla report, they have very specific target on that yeah, we should employ that number of employees in other categories as well, transgender, and they are regularly reporting the status, that by the end of this year, we have employed this number as others category. When we talk about sustainable sourcing, so that sustainable sourcing is one again important aspect where industry is facing issue, because I can take care of my house, being an industry person, being an industry company owner, that yes, I need to follow the ESG compliance, I need to, comply with all regulations. But what about other supply chain management vendors, where I'm sourcing material? How I can ensure that they are also following the same sustainability practice? And whether I should stop business if they are right now not following the sustainability practice? Because not necessarily that right now every business is following, very specifically MSME people, the small businesses. And that will again come under the negative impression if I stop my business with the MSME business. Because if I stop, then it will come that I'm not promoting the MSME. So it is certain where the dilemma for the industry, dilemma for the companies, that what can be done to be comes under the picture of sustainable sourcing. Because if I want to, keep my vendors as a sustainable practice vendors, either I should incur cost on by, company by himself, or maybe somewhere I need to promote them to follow the sustainability practice. So that is again second point where it is taking time. Third is about reporting frameworks. So as of now, India has a mandate of BRSR reporting for 1,000 listed companies only. For rest of listed companies or unlisted companies, private limited partnership firms, there is no mandate about ESG compliance. There is other global reporting framework as well, which was used by the at least around, you can say, top 250 or 300 companies already for last 10 years. If we talk about Aditya Birla or some other good companies, Tata, they are already following that global reporting standards. So now it's a double compliance for them. Although SEBI has given mandate that if you are already following any global reporting framework, you just need to make a cross-reference for the BRSR. And the positive aspect is our BRSR 9 principles are completely aligned with top 2 global reporting framework, that is GRI and IR. So that is something a little bit challenge in terms of repetition of certain regulatory aspect, but some were taken care by SEBI already. So these 3 challenges which I have experienced till the date, and companies are trying to address the same best of their capabilities. Thank you, sir.
That's quite a lot of useful information. Thank you, Harsha ma'am. What you said, and talking about what the companies are required to do on different fronts and yet manage profitability, reminds me of what we were told in college on the first day. In the opening address, our director told us that there are 3 things that a college student looks for: good grades, good social life, and enough sleep. And he said at any given point in time, you will get only 2 out of 3. So it sounds very much like that. But let me hand it back to a real-life professor and take his views, particularly on this thing of, she talked about alignment to global standards. How far is India following the West? And do you see a time when we might be able to lead or even create a new voice?
So I think that's the question I was waiting for. It's something I really want to talk about. So, and if we really look at the West, and there is always this debate in the climate circles, that West is consuming this much and we are consuming that much, but it will be worthwhile to just look at the history of what we call as development. So the Western economy or the Western society is based on this idea of what I like to call as a linear idea of progress. So right from post-enlightenment and industrial era, there is this notion that we have the technology, we have the science, we can use as much resources as we like, and we create a better world. That is what modernity is all about, And if you see, this is the premise of the Western world and many developed nations, that there are resources. I mean, colonization is actually an outcome of that. There are resources to be exploited to create a better world. It is an idea that if you keep doing this, you keep progressing, you keep progressing, you keep progressing. And now, I call this time as it's a crisis of confidence. If you look at the Western world today, they are in an extremely retrospective, reflective mode. The problem is, and this is what you said, post-1960s, Silent Spring, Small is Beautiful by Schumacher, and there was still this publication in the 60s, but still climate change was an abstract concept. But in the last decade, what has happened to the Western world is climate crisis has come on their doorstep. You have floods happening in the River Rhine in Germany, which has a cemented concrete kind of a bank. The Western world has, we look at Western cities, we find them very beautiful, but actually they lack biodiversity. The intensive agriculture that they practice has led to a total destruction of multicultural or what I would, biodiversity in terms of the forest. So forests near agriculture fields actually are monoculture, are not multiculture. And this is a time when the Western world is actually realizing, and mark my words, that the path they took was wrong. And there is this 2 kind of a very clear thought processes that exist. So if you meet young people in Europe, they're very upset, they're very angry. They don't want to take cars, they will buy a second-hand car, they will wear second-hand shoes. And there is this, the Western mind, which is like, that whole statement by, I think, Mallory, who said, if there is Everest, why do you want to climb the Everest? He says, because it is there. You know, this is that white male Western mind that wants to dominate nature and create a better world. Now that is being questioned right now. And what we are realizing increasingly, the whole problem with the Eurocentric Western approach is that we will not question our consumption pattern. We will continue to live the way we want to live, but we will find a new technology that will solve the problem. So every 10 years, there is this kind of a silver bullet technology. People are talking about green hydrogen. You were talking about solar 10 years back. You were talking about batteries. Now batteries, the mining of batteries, where is your lithium coming from? Their lithium is coming from Congo. And the kind of destruction these batteries are doing, nobody is calculating. So I think what I always tell in these forums is that, one, India should not make the same mistakes that the Western world did. We do not need to go through the same trajectory and end up in this situation. Two, a technologized view of solving the problem, I don't think will lead us anywhere, because it will lead to new kind of crisis. Three, we in our culture already have so much. Look at all our families. Look at your childhood. The t-shirt that became small to me was given to my younger brother, then probably to the, somebody, the maid who was working, and she made it into a pocha after 5 years. So we have it in us. So in that sense, when you showed me that example of you were saying that, to make biodiesel, you don't need any electricity, you attach it in a seesaw. That is our Indian jugaad. So in our Indian culture, in our Indian philosophy, I think we have a lot of frugality and sustainability, and we don't use the word sustainability, by the way, without using the word sustainability. And I feel if you're really looking for a model, even for business houses, I would say, then we also need to find our own model. And we need not be simply following the Western model blindly. There's a lot to learn from the Western world, but I don't think it can be a kind of a blind belief in whatever they are pushing. And as our economic advisors are already said, sometimes the Western standards can also be used as trade practices, as coercive trade practices. So my view would be to find our own models, because culturally speaking, philosophically speaking, you look at our poetry, you look at the Bhakti movement, you look at Sufism, we all have a sense of sustainability. So in fact, I would be very much interested that if we were to frame standards that are relevant to our culture, or coming from our own culture, that would be more doable. I mean, Jugaad is now seen very seriously by many countries as to how we are able to actually get things done by using very less resources. So why not mainstream that and discover a vocabulary that is our own, rather than always look for what the US is doing or Sweden is doing. So that's my view on the matter.
Thank you. Very, very well said. In fact, the entire concept of future practice being rooted in past tradition has its own value, especially because as climate change intensifies, the people who will be most affected will be the people who can least afford it. So in that sense, I think one other aspect of ESG, the S part, is what can you do? And I don't mean only CSR. What can you do for the bottom of the pyramid? Dr. Ranka, maybe I can ask you to take that.
I think, see, we are living in a world where technology tool is for the first time becoming available to masses. Information has been de-bottlenecked. I think India particularly, if you look at today's discussion, reference to India, we have been de-bottlenecked. This internet is a Brahmastra given to us by the Goras, okay? That's my plain talking. Now, the question will be, where is the maximum impact of sustainability happening? It's at the bottom of the pyramid. It's basically the day-to-day sector. it would be the agriculture, it would be the makan, it would be the roads, it would be the daily life consumption. If you really look at the impact, it is the energy sector. But if you really look at it, how much research energy, how much innovation energy we are putting on these sectors? And the answer is very, very minimal. Isn't this something where there is an opportunity for industry? That means rather than following the Western into the electronics and the high-tech industry, let's go back to the basics. And let's innovate at the basic level and redefine in today's context of ESG and sustainability, saying that we need to re-innovate this whole sphere again. Maybe it was innovated in 1960, maybe 1940, but let's do it now. And let's bring that cradle to grave concept and, stepwise development into that whole area. And I think with our population, if we really want to bring the population to a certain economic standard where they are comfortable to live, I'm using the word comfortable to live, you will have to have mass opportunity of employment at least for the next 40 years. And that will come from the addressing the bottom of the pyramid. So industry, I think, must look at the total addressable market. Industry must look at the arbitrage which exists in that area, particularly with respect to technology, re-innovation, and new practices. And I think we should look at the increasing our wages consistently with respect to improving the productivity out of the innovation. Innovation needs to be doing that. One point I would like to make, like since we have a person from the university and this is one of my passion area, I am proposing a very dramatic way how the college education should change. See, in India today, all our businesses who are existing and are working, they are almost at 70–80% of the global standards, or even sometimes 90%. But is our academia there? No. They are maybe at 30–35–40%. Can the students actually start working only for innovation and become part, a low-cost part available to the industry? And can industry actually utilize that new brain resource for innovation? And it is not for 6 months, it's for 40 months. Only 2 months he goes to the college, and every day in the evening or in the morning they teach. Today 5G is enabling us. So a lot of audio-visual technologies are becoming available to India. Data consumption in India is very cheap. We must take advantage of all this and transform the education into an innovation-led sort of, industry-ready person. And I think this can be done. It just needs a radical thinking. Sometimes it may become a little too much to digest, but you need to think radically if you really want India to come out and take a leapfrog over China at the lowest cost. So this could be one of it. So thank you.
Dr. Saab, a really, really nicely disruptive idea. In fact, it goes back to one of the statements of Jayaprakash Narayan in '75. He had said that if every business owner can turn his consumers, his customers, into people who can also put something back in the business, then everybody becomes a stakeholder in the business. As an example, last year in Uttarakhand, we tried this at the Char Dham Yatra. So the Char Dham Yatra puts an enormous burden on the state of Uttarakhand. We talked to every hotel, and in every hotel, after they cook, where does the used oil go? Either it goes back into your food, which is terrible for liver, kidney, heart, and everything else, or it is sent down the drain at the back of the hotel, which eventually finds its way to the nearest tributary of the Ganga or the Yamuna. So what we encourage people to do, and we had a small NGO network, which took half-liter bottles of fresh oil and went to these restaurants and dhabas and said, for every 5 liters of used oil you collect and give us, we'll give you half a liter of fresh oil. So going back to classical barter, we produced 6,000 liters of biodiesel from that collection in a single sitting. So one thing that a lot of businesses can do is re-engage with your customer bases, figure out where your product is going, and without using labels like EPR, see if you can actually engage with the bottom of the pyramid to give you back value and give them some value in return. I'm going to give it to Madam Harsha for her closing comments on this thought, particularly on circular economy and how the circular economy can actually create efficiencies in commerce.
So when it's come to circular economy and with respect to coordinating it with compliances, initially it was thought that it's difficult for businesses to think about on that part, but right now if I talk about circular economy, businesses already found out the opportunities in this area as well. As I sir mentioned about the EPR, the extended producer responsibilities with respect to the plastic. So initially it was a thought that how businesses will take care about the recycling of their plastic consumption, whether it is being manufacturer or an importer or a brand owner kind of things. But now businesses has find an opportunity that they are setting up the recycling plant within their capacity, within their plant area. And now they are thinking to, first, how they can utilize the same within their organization. And second, if they are not able to utilize, they are trying to get a business in terms of selling that credit for the other EPR regulatory compliance companies because they need to meet their target. So one of our client, which is a textile-based client, they were already working for yarn, fabric and everything. They have set up the plant where now they are recycling the PET plastic bottles and converting that PET plastic bottle into fiber. The maximum portion of their manufacturing of fiber they are consuming within their own plants, and whatever the things that they left with them, now they are trying to capitalize the same with the EPR regulations because they comes under the 4th category of registration where they can provide that credits to other companies. So this is somewhere, Indian businesses always have mind to find things and business in everything. So in ESG part also, when it's come to the circular economy, now they started to find the things or the options that how they can make a business. Carbon credit. So few days back, one of company came to us that how they can register themselves because they are in the solar energy and everything for the carbon trading purpose. Later on, after inquiry, we got to know that their project is 6-year-olds and it is very difficult to get them registered on any of available marketplace because maximum size of that project should be the life not more than 2 years. But now the companies are aware about things that, okay, they can make a business from this ESG aspect as well. Circular economy can also help them to create certain profits out of that. So this is how they are trying, the barter thing, which sir suggested right now. They are trying to create certain business from that aspect also. And in terms of, again, if we talk about compliance aspect, where, circular economy comes, so they are trying to find out options where they can actually help environment, they can actually help society. So they are actually running certain programs where, within the locality, to clean the area, to somewhere, or find out certain ways where waste can be recycled and can be reused, where they can somewhere change their process to have, less wastage for recycling. So this is how somewhere businesses are trying and making, because if we talk about the HUL and HPCL we were talking about, so they are already in a plan to set up again recycling units within their business only, so that the EPR regulations they can follow by themselves. So this is how I think they are trying to address this issue.
Thank you very much. I think we are almost at the end of the discussion, so we have a few minutes if anybody from the floor would like to ask questions. And can I request somebody, a volunteer, maybe to just pass the mics around? Does anybody have a question from the audience? Ma'am. Please give your name and also direct your question to one of the panelists.
I think, can I speak in Hindi or Gujarati? So I can express my words better. Yeah, I am Himali Vyas, and we are into automation business, industrial automation, IT, IIoT. So almost બધી જ ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રી જોડે અમે કામ કરીએ છીએ. આજનો આ જે વિષય છે મારો બહુ જ પ્રિય છે, કારણ કે મને મીરાબાઈનું એક વાક્ય યાદ આવે છે, સબસે ઊંચી પ્રેમ સગાઈ. તો આ એટલા માટે કે તમે જ્યારે કોઈ ફિલિંગ સાથે અટેચ થાવ છો તો રિસર્ચ તમે ઓટોમેટિક કરવા માંડો છો. જેમ કે આપણા ઘરમાં ઇમરજન્સી આવે, રાત્રે કોઈ બીમાર પડી જાય અચાનક ને ડૉક્ટર અવેલેબલ નથી, તો કેવી રીતે આપણે એને સોલ્વ કરીએ. સો આ એક માઇન્ડસેટ છે. તો જ્યારે હું ડભોઈ મારું વતન છે, જેનું મૂળ નામ દર્ભાવતી છે. દર્ભાવતી એટલે જ્યાં દર્ભ વધારે થાય છે. તો જ્યારે હું ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રીઝ જોઉં છું કે કોઈ નવી ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રીનું બોર્ડ લાગ્યું છે, તો મને એમ થાય કે હવે અહીં દર્ભ નહીં, કોઈ ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રી ઉગી નીકળશે. તો આ માટે ઇન્ડસ્ટ્રીઝ શું કરી શકે કે ત્યાં ઓલરેડી કોઈક ને કોઈક, આપણો દેશ એટલો બધો ડાયવર્સ સિઝન્સ, એટલી બધી ડાયવર્સ વેધર, ને જે આપણે કહીએ કે બધું જ છે અહીં, એ બધું જ આપણે કદાચ બધા બિલ્ડિંગો વાવીને નાશ કરી રહ્યા છીએ. તો એ કેવી રીતે એના ઉપર કામ થઈ શકે મને કોઈ આઈડિયા નથી. બસ મને દુઃખ થાય છે જ્યારે હું જોઉં છું કોઈ નવા બિલ્ડિંગનું બોર્ડ.
I don't think there is a question exactly. It's a comment more. नहीं, see, जो मैं समझता हूँ कि देश को यदि हमको आगे बढ़ाना है, भारत को, तो नई इंडस्ट्री तो लगनी है. सवाल ये है कि किस नई इंडस्ट्री को हम लगा रहे हैं, किस उद्देश्य से लगा रहे हैं और कितनी इको फ्रेंडली बना रहे हैं. तो देखना ये है कि क्या हम जो भारत की रहने की संस्कृति है, जैसे मैं कहता हूँ कि भारत के एडवांटेजेस क्या है, आपके पास 4 जोड़ी कपड़े रहे आप चल सकते हो, गर्म पानी की ज़रूरत नहीं है, आपके पास एक 2 व्हीलर है चल सकते हो. तो रियली जो आपकी लाइफ सस्टेनिंग नीड्स है बहुत कम है. आप वेजिटेरियन कंट्री हो, तो हमारी जो इंडस्ट्री है वो हाईएस्ट क्वालिटी की, लेकिन हमारी खुद की ज़रूरत देखते हुए होना चाहिए. जो एक माइंडसेट जो मैं चाहता हूँ कि हिंदुस्तान के लिए एक अगले 50 वर्षों का अपने को एक आगे एक एजेंडा सेट करना है, और जहाँ पे एक मूलभूत परिवर्तन लाना है, वो है एक्सपेक्टिंग एक्सेलेंस. हम आज चलता है एटीट्यूड लेके चल रहे हैं, और मुझे लगता है कि ESG में एक्सेलेंस भी वो ई में आ जाना चाहिए एनवायरनमेंट के साथ. तो ही हम एक बेहतर देश बन पाएंगे, तो ही हम एक विकसित देश बन पाएंगे. और वहाँ पे एक गड़बड़ है, तो मुझे लगता है कि नया काम तो होना ही चाहिए. बराबर.
I think that is a very effective last word. So maybe without going further, unless there is any one more question from the audience. Okay, we'll take one more. Last one, yes. We are 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Benita. I represent Zydex over here. It was really fantastic to hear the perspective from every side, from the financial side, from the education side, and the research part of it. I'm really a good fan of Dr. Ajay Ranka. I have got a very small opportunity to work with him. But level of research, what he goes into, because I have also done my PhD in biotechnology, and though now I'm serving in a very specific, different perspective in CSR and ESG. My direct question is to Professor Pratyush Shankar. Basically, can we think of, again, coming back to Gurukul in India? The concept of Gurukul was an applied one, where we're using the limited resources making the youngsters in a researchers mode and innovators. And in that era, when you see, we had maximum innovators. And that concept we have completely demobilized over here and getting our children in a specific Western culture who don't respect anyone. So thank you. If you can address a bit of it.
So I think one is that I would not like to fall into the trap of Western tradition and modernity. And let me explain. So this is it's a very question that we are always asked. I mean, there's a time for the past and there's time for the present. So when we say that take a pause and learn from the past, I don't think we are talking about going back to the past. Because, well, position of women in the past, nutrition, health, our average expectancy of life before vaccines came was 38 years, right? You all come from the pharma sector. We need medicines. The life that we are living today is also because of modernity, and modernity has been embraced by us, by the others. The question to ask, and when you use the word Western, even I use that, is not to make the same mistakes that the West did. So that is number one. Number two, जब आपने गुरुकुल की बात करी, I think what I can learn from the Indian tradition is holistic learning. The problem of climate change will not be solved by silos of disciplines. हमारे problem क्या है universities में? Universities are very traditional structures. So you have a department of science, you have a HOD of science, you have a department of commerce, you have a department of business, you have anthropology, culture studies. ये जो problem है environment की would need an absolutely interdisciplinary approach, which means that a student is taught like the Gurukul tradition, taught to be sensitive about everything, about air, about atmosphere, about literature, about poetry, about science, and having a holistic view of the world. What the word we use is interdisciplinary learning. So what I can take from your comment is not necessarily to go back, but yes, in the past, in a Gurukul, a student was taught to do everything. उनको sports भी कराते थे, उनको music भी कराते थे, science भी कराते थे. And you know, the present day scientific community and this whole thing about getting into engineering and medical colleges has totally devoid the world of humanities, culture, and the world we exist in. So there's too much emphasis on STEM, to my mind, is problematic. So I think what I take from you is we need to educate our younger generation in a holistic and an empathetic manner. अब उसकी क्या फॉर्म होगी, उसकी अलग फॉर्म हो सकती है, शायद कोई गुरुकुल भी बना दे, कोई एक मॉडर्न यूनिवर्सिटी में भी कर दे. In a democratic setup, there would be many ways.
I think on that very holistic note, I want to thank all my distinguished panelists for a lively discussion and the audience for being such good participants and being so well engaged.
Yeah,
and thank you. It's back to the organizers.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. On that note, thank you for a wonderful talk earlier this morning and for moderating this panel. Thank you all the panelists as well. I think we've started the philosophical discussion on sustainability through these first two sessions, now getting a little bit onto the ground realities of the regulatory landscape. I think the next panel will get it more nitty-gritty into what is around, what revolves around it. It was really a wonderful first session, and I thank you once again, Dr. Ray. We started on time. We have a 15-minute break. We'll start exactly at 11:30. I think we have a long way to cover, and we'd like to make sure that we do justice to the time all the panelists have. Okay. Thank you.